Forex overtrading, the market stays. Your account leaves. You didn't walk into Forex to worship a blinking chart. You came for profit. Period. But look at you now, glued to candles like a moth to a porch light, chasing every tick like it owes you rent. Pause. That's not hustle. That's an addiction dressed up as ambition. Here's the ugly mirror. When the original point make money fades, the brain hunts for a different prize, constant participation. Not profit. Presence. You don't want to win, but you want to be in. You end a trade, maybe a tiny win, maybe a quick stop, and your finger twitches for the next entry, like a slot machine, regular reaching for one more pull. The chart hums. The heart jumps. The mouse clicks. And the account bleeds. Call it what it is, fear of missing out masquerading as discipline. You tell yourself the market is alive and you need to be with it. No. Dude, you're not with it. You're being farmed by it. The market has infinite patience. It will sit there tomorrow, next week, next decade. You won't not if you keep feeding it fees, slippage, and death by 1,000 low-quality trades. You already know the pattern. The screen feels quiet for a minute and your head starts inventing setups that aren't there. The mind whispers. There's always a level, and like clockwork you draw, redraw, and carve a doorway where there's only a wall. Then you rationalize, it's fine. This one's different. Sure. Different angle. Same trap. The market doesn't need to beat you with big moves. It just needs to keep you clicking. Overtrading is the house edge. Your need to act props up its bottom line. Let's cut through the noise. 90% of early-stage traders, under roughly 3.5 years of scars, crave that real-time rush. They want a position on the books, any position, so the account feels alive. That itch to stay engaged isn't strategy. It's anxiety with a broker. And anxiety is expensive. What happens when you string multiple pairs at the same time, not because the thesis multiplies, but because the boredom does? Correlation quietly sets your hair on fire. You think you diversified. You actually duplicated risk. Each click buys a dose of relief, not a sliver of edge. That's how you end a day busy and end a month broke. There's a louder truth underneath all the rationalizations. The market is permanently open for business, but your capital is not permanently open for damage. You can miss 1,000 moves and still catch the next clean one. But you can't survive 1,000 reckless stabs. Opportunities are endless is only useful if you stop treating today like the last train out of town. If the market stays and you leave, it won. Not because it was smart, because you were restless. Listen to the signals you pretend are strategy, but are really cravings. The phantom pressure in your chest when the candle expands. The sudden urge to shrink your stop so you can fit 2 entries. The instant need to get back in 2 minutes after closing out. None of those are trade ideas. They're withdrawal symptoms from participation. You're not scanning for probability. You're scratching an itch. And here's the dagger. The chart always offers an invitation. Zoom in far enough, and chaos looks like opportunity. Lower timeframes churn out a fresh batch of almost setups every few minutes. Each one dressed like a chance. Each one hiding the same fee schedule and the same exhaustion spiral. You call it precision. The market calls it rent. What does the 5, and is it, original content actually say, stripped of ego? You forgot the mission profit and replaced it with activity. You measured success by how in the market you were, not by whether the trade deserved your risk. You treated candles like a casino buffet. If the trays are full, and you must keep eating. That mindset doesn't just miss good trades. It manufactures bad ones. So ask the one question you keep dodging. If the market isn't going anywhere, why are you sprinting, like every tick is a vanishing lifeboat? If the purpose is money, why does your behavior worship motion? If participation feels like safety, why does your equity curve look like a staircase going down? You want the blunt edge. Here, the market will outlast your patience, your attention, and your capital. It doesn't need to outthink you. It only needs you to stay excited. Pause. At a game, as walk, and merry of there, that Samana game. And excitement is the easiest thing to sell to someone who forgot why they started. Which pulls us to the next pressure point, the one you quietly know but won't admit out loud. If your head spins on the micro view, and the micro view multiplies fake signals, what exactly are those tiny timeframes doing to your judgment? You zoom into the 1 minute window and pretend it's clarity. It isn't. It's a hall of mirrors where noise dresses up as signal and urgency feels like precision. Pause. The smaller the slice of time, the louder your brain gets. The candle twitches and your judgment twitches with it. That's not edge. That's agitation. Look at the loop the original content exposes. Traders under roughly 3.5 years chase real time because it numbs the discomfort of waiting. A position equals calm, so they stack positions across pairs to stay calm longer. It reads like control. It behaves like compulsion. The account becomes a pacifier, not a business. And when a trade closes stop or early take profit, the mind lunges for instant re-entry to keep the pacifier in. Participation first. Probability second. That ordering quietly guts the whole point. Lower time frames amplify that disorder. Each micro move creates an almost setup. The brain strings those almost setups into a narrative of inevitability. There's always an entry. Sure, if the only requirement is motion, but motion without quality is just churn. And churn is how fees, spreads, and slippage collect their tax. The market doesn't have to outsmart you when it can outspin you. Now, contrast that with the higher time frame reality embedded in the source. Bigger windows mute the static. Liquidity thickens. Structure hardens. Support and resistance stop behaving like rumor and start behaving like scaffolding. Humans wobble in small windows. They stabilize when scale increases. On the large view, your own mood swings lose the steering wheel. You see the map instead of the potholes. That alone strips away half the fake urgency you keep calling setup flow. Here's the bitter part. You know all this. You repeat the lines, reduce noise, respect, structure, wait for quality. And then you zoom back into the 1 minute and go fishing with a bare hook because boredom whispers louder than discipline. The problem isn't knowledge. It's the craving to feel involved. The lower you go, the more the platform can feed that craving. Every few minutes, the chart hands you a new costume for the same weak idea. The original message keeps hammering the same theme. The market will still be here. You might not. Overtrading is how traders exit while price keeps marching. You tell yourself you're building experience. What you're actually building is a reflex. See movement. Take action. Ask questions later. That reflex becomes your default. And defaults don't care about intent. They run you. There's also the quiet correlation trap that hides inside the many pairs at once habit. You treat each pair like a separate bet. The market treats your exposure like one big theme. When the theme rotates, everything moves against you together. It's not diversification. It's duplication. The inner motive isn't strategy anyway. It's that itch to keep the screen busy so you can feel purposeful. Purpose doesn't come from blinking pixels. It comes from putting capital only where it is deserved. And that last sentence is the fracture line where the whole thing breaks. The original point, make money, can't coexist with the addiction to constant presence. One of them will suffocate the other. If presence wins, you get activity metrics and an empty wallet. If profit wins, you tolerate silence like a professional, because silence is where weak trades die before they cost you. So, yes, the content points to the obvious pivot. Enlarge the frame so the market's traps shrink relative to the real path. Not a motivational slogan, just mechanics. Bigger frames simplify decisions. They throttle the urge to meddle. They reinforce levels with actual participation behind them. They give you fewer, cleaner invitations. And fewer, cleaner invitations force a harsher question on you. The same question this script keeps circling without letting you off the hook. If you stripped away the urge to always be in, how many of your recent entries would still qualify as a business decision rather than a way to calm your nerves? You keep calling it discipline, but the behavior in the source text screams something else: goal switching. The mission starts as profit and quietly mutates into constant involvement. Pause. That mutation is the system error almost nobody admits. Once participation becomes the reward, the brain downgrades every criterion that slows participation. Risk quality blurs. Entry standards soften. Stops creep. Targets shrink. The calendar loses meaning because the clock takes over. You are not trading a thesis anymore. You are treating anxiety. And anxiety does not pay. That is why the always be in reflex feels rational in the moment. A live position silences the noise in your head, so you stack positions across pairs to keep the silence going. You tell yourself it is diversification. The subtext is simple. One position is not enough sedative. The position is not a trade. It is a mood stabilizer. That is how early closes multiply. You cut the win too soon, not because the edge evaporated, but because the craving to reset the cycle returned. A quick notch of realized profit buys permission for the next hit. Close. Re-enter. Close. Re-enter. You are not compounding capital. You are compounding compulsion. Zooming lower compresses time and bloats narrative. One small wiggle on a 1-minute chart becomes a prophecy. Two small wiggles become inevitability. The chart is not lying to you. Your attention span is. The source points at the trap with a blunt finger. The market always looks like it has an entry if you stare hard enough and close enough. That is not a feature. That is a filter bubble. The smaller the window, the more your brain hallucinates structure because it refuses to tolerate uncertainty. It is not patience to sit on hands at low time frames. It is torture. So, you do not sit. You swipe. You click. You feed the machine. There is another mechanic embedded in the original content that stings if you let it land. You get back in immediately after a stop or a timid take profit because the loss of position feels like loss of identity. Without a live trade, who are you on that platform? The terminal looks empty. The timeline looks slow. The mind screams that you are late. So you sprint into the next tick and call it keeping pace. It is not pace. It is panic in nice clothes. Revenge trading does not need rage to qualify. It only needs hurry. And then there is the role of higher time frames, not as decoration, but as a choke collar on your worst impulses. Larger windows mute the siren call that every candle is a call to action. Liquidity thickens. Structure repeats. Levels gain teeth. Your own mood loses leverage because context stretches. The moment you look from the ceiling to the map exposes how many setups were just jitter. In that longer view, your entries either line up with an actual path or they die in the dark where they belong. The original text does not pitch romance about higher frames. It points at mechanics. Less noise. more confirmation, fewer excuses. You can see the through line now. Overtrading is not a fluke. It is an operating system with perverse incentives. The incentive is to cure boredom and soothe fear of missing out. The cost is spread, slippage, attention, and eventually, capital. The market survives this dynamic by default because time is its ally. You do not have that luxury. Your float is finite. Your focus is finite. Your patience is finite. The market thrives when you sprint. You survive when you refuse to. So the problem is not that opportunities are scarce. The problem is that you keep redefining opportunity to justify constant entry. The original text hits it square. The market remains. The traders leave. Not because the market was cruel, because the traders were restless. The chart offers endless invitations, and you RSVP to almost all of them like it is a party. Here is the acid line. If the invitation is always open, it is not special. And if it is not special, why is your money there? Strip the slogans and sit with the ugliest sentence in the source material. Everything changes when you stop forcing it. Not a mantra, a mirror. If forcing trades is how you made the mess, what does not forcing expose about your actual edge? Pause. When you press, remove the sedative of constant participation. What remains of your process, besides a stack of habits that only work when you are numb? Which leaves the contrast the next section has to drag into daylight. The naive belief that more action equals more control versus the cold reality that more action usually equals more damage. If the account is bleeding while the market is still there, what exactly are you actually controlling? You think more action equals more control. It doesn't. It's just more chances to get clipped while telling yourself you're active. Pause. The naive model says constant decisions create mastery. The real model says constant decisions create fatigue, blur standards, and feed the broker gods their daily bread. You don't look disciplined. You look busy. Busy is the mask. Bleeding is the truth. Line it up, side by side. Naive belief. Screen time compounds skill. Cold reality. Screen time without selectivity compounds noise. Your attention phrase. Your threshold for good enough collapses a little each hour. You stop testing trades against a plan and start testing them against boredom. Call it what it is, twitch trading. Naive belief. Lower time frames equal precision. Cold reality. Lower time frames equal hallucination. Every tiny fluctuation looks like structure because you can't stand uncertainty. You draw levels to tranquilize yourself, not to locate asymmetry. The chart isn't generous. You're just suggestible. Naive belief. More pairs equal diversification. Cold reality. More pairs equal duplication. Correlated themes run you over in one sweep, and you call it unlucky. It wasn't luck. It was the same idea with different tickers pretending to be variety. Naive belief. Faster entries equal control. Cold reality. Faster entries equal surrender. You surrendered to urgency, to the fear of missing out, to the itch that a flat account makes you late. Control isn't speed. Control is saying no until the setup earns your money. Naive belief. Small wins stacked quickly equal momentum. Cold reality. Small wins harvested early equal payment for the next impulse. You clip profits to scratch the itch of re-entry. The account becomes a vending machine. Insert trade. Get dopamine. Repeat. Momentum. No. Maintenance dose. Now put the higher time frame argument from the source under the same light. Bigger windows don't stroke the ego. They throttle it. Liquidity is thicker. Levels are sturdier. Fake urgency gets drowned by context. On the larger view, you either have alignment or you don't. There's less room to pretend. That is exactly why you avoid it when the itch spikes. The higher frame refuses to bless your impatience. Look at the costs you never log. Spreads and slippage are obvious. The silent tax is cognitive depletion. Decision after decision with low signal destroys your ability to recognize real signal when it finally shows up. By the time a clean setup arrives on the bigger map, you're fried, underconfident, or already trapped in something dumb on a microchart. Then you rationalize, it's fine. It is not fine. It is the bill coming due. The source text nukes the core illusion. The market persists. Traders don't. If permanence is on one side and restlessness on the other, which side do you think pays out over time? The market does not need to be cruel. It just needs you to keep pressing buttons. Activity is its house edge. You hand it an edge every time you confuse movement with opportunity and participation with purpose. There's another angle you keep dodging. You claim you want money, but your routine worships stimulation. If the true goal were profit, most of your trades wouldn't exist. They exist because flat feels like failure and in feels like identity. Dude, that's not strategy. That's a mood disorder with a charting platform. And then the punchline you won't say out loud. You secretly hope luck will paper over the slop. You press entries and then sit there manifesting while price decides whether to rescue you. That's not trading. That's superstition with better lighting. The original line is surgical. Stop forcing. When you stop forcing, luck stops pretending to be a plan. You either have a map built on structure and liquidity, or you have noise and desire. One of these can scale. The other eats accounts. So here's the split screen. On the left, naive action, constant presence, shallow wins, deep fatigue, slow drain. On the right, fewer decisions, thicker context, stronger levels, quieter mind, cleaner outcomes. The market stays either way. Your account picks a side. Pause. If you keep choosing motion over money, what exactly do you expect to change besides the balance? Which drags us to the only pathway worth testing, not theory, not slogans, an operating standard that makes the itch irrelevant because the rules make the entries rare and deserved. If you strip the craving out and left only criteria, what would your playbook actually look like? The exit isn't a hack. It's a standard. Pause. If the purpose is profit and not constant presence, then the operating system has to reflect that. Not motivational fluff. Mechanics. A professional standard makes the itch irrelevant because the criteria are heavier than the craving. It doesn't ask whether you feel like trading. It asks whether the market has earned your money. Start where the original text points the flashlight. Scale. A higher time frame as the primary map is not decoration. It is the governor on impulse. In that map, structure is visible, liquidity is meaningful, and levels have memory. When that map is the first filter, most micro-temptations disqualify themselves. The platform still blinks. The mind still twitches. But the criteria don't care. If the larger structure doesn't align, the idea is noise by definition, not by mood. Pause. That reframe alone demotes participation from a reward to a side effect. Then identity has to shift. Flat becomes a position, not a void to panic fill. A flat account is not an absence of action. It is the presence of restraint. Under this standard, entries are rare on purpose. Rarity is not a limitation. It is a signal that the criteria are real. When entries are common, your filter is fake. When entries are rare, your filter is working. The market stays. You conserve. That is the split the source material keeps shoving in your face. Risk logic has to be written before entry, not after discomfort begins. That means risk per position isn't a vibe that fluctuates with boredom. It is fixed ahead of time and sized to survive stretches of silence. Stops live where the idea is wrong, not where your nerves want relief. Targets live where the structure pays asymmetrically, not where your itch wants a quick receipt. Early take profits are treated as theft from edge, not as a pat on the head for being active. If the purpose is money, the trade either pays according to plan or it exits according to plan. Anything in between is you bargaining with anxiety. The feedback loop also flips. You stop measuring days by how many trades and start measuring by how many disqualifications were correct. A good day under this standard can look like no entries and a clean mind. A bad day can look like many entries and a dirty conscience. That inversion is brutal on the ego and perfect for the account. The original content hints at it with a simple sledgehammer. Everything changes when you stop forcing. Forced trades create fake learning and real losses. Disqualified trades create real learning and zero damage. Time handling changes too. Lower windows are demoted to execution, not idea generation. They provide precision only after the higher map has granted a thesis. If the large view says, "not yet," the small view has no authority. If the large view says, "maybe," the small view is allowed to refine, not invent. You cannot hallucinate structure when the structure is already decided. And when the large view says, "yes," urgency actually drops because the context is doing the heavy lifting. The entry becomes a placement problem, not a personality contest. The performance scoreboard gets stripped of noise. You don't count streaks of small gains that exist to finance the next itch. You count only the trades that met criteria, were held according to plan, and contributed to compounding. Everything else is tagged as maintenance dose and treated like a relapse. The standard does not scold. It records. And the record will embarrass you into alignment or eject you from the game. Either outcome is cleaner than years of pretending busy equals brave. And here is the psychological fulcrum the source text practically underlines. When the rules are heavy, boredom stops being a villain. It becomes a filter. Boredom means the market hasn't earned your capital today. That is not a problem to solve. It is protection doing its job. Always be in turns into always be ready. Readiness is cheap. Participation is expensive. A pro mind knows the difference and pays only when the map, the level, and the risk logic agree. None of this requires heroics. It requires surrender, not to price, but to criteria. You stop fighting silence. You stop bribing your nerves with micro entries. You stop worshiping motion. And you start letting the market prove itself before it rents your capital. The text said it plainly, the market will still be here. The question is whether your standards will keep you here with it. Pause. If the standard elevates profit over presence, what happens to your identity when the chart stays quiet and no one is there to clap for your patience? You can dress it up with new indicators, new pairs, new screens. The core doesn't change. The original mission was profit. The behavior drifted into presence. Pause. That drift is not a footnote. It is the engine behind every rushed click, every duplicated theme across pairs, every early exit that buys permission for the next hit. Strip away the gloss, and the pattern says the same thing in plain English. The market stays. The way. Restless trader leaves. Tie the threads. The craving for a live position poses as discipline. The lower the time frame, the louder the hallucination of structure. Correlation hides inside diversification and turns variety into a single first, larger mistake. Cognitive energy bleeds out decision by decision until clean setups arrive and find you fried, second-guessing, or already trapped. You call it experience. The equity curve calls it erosion. The source text points at one lever that does not flatter the ego, but does protect the account, scale. A higher map is not a style preference. It is a circuit breaker. Liquidity thickens. Levels repeat. Context drowns the fake urgency that micro windows amplify. When the large view is the first filter, most of the chart's constant invitations die before they cost you. That is not romance. That is mechanics. Pause. You do not need more courage. You need fewer excuses. Identity shifts with that lever. Flat turns from an emptiness to fill into a position to hold. Silence stops being a threat and becomes a filter. A day with no entries no longer reads like failure. It reads like criteria doing their job. The scoreboard flips, from how many trades to how many correct disqualifications. That inversion hurts pride and heals capital. Pain now. Less pain later. It is not heroic. It is boring on purpose. Risk logic under this standard is written before the trade exists. The amount at risk is sized for stretches of nothing, not for a mood. The stop lives where the idea is wrong, not where nerves want a nap. The target lives where the structure pays, not where impatience wants a receipt. Early take profits stop being trophies and start reading like theft from edge. When the plan governs exits and not the heartbeat, the itch loses its leverage. Timeframe roles settle into place. Big windows choose the path. Small windows execute the plan. The small view does not invent ideas when the large view says no. It refines entries when the large view says yes. That demotion of the micro view suffocates the habit of manufacturing trades to tranquilize boredom. And when the invitation is rare and deserved, urgency drops because context does the heavy lifting. You are not racing ticks. You are placing capital. The psychological atmosphere changes with these mechanics. Participation no longer buys identity. Presence is not a drug. The mind stops bargaining for a fix. There is less to announce, less to defend, and more to record. The record is merciless and useful. Were you aligned with structure and liquidity? Or were you soothing anxiety with activity? Answer honestly, and the edge either emerges or the habit gets exposed. Both outcomes are progress. One compounds money. The other compels a choice. No pep talk hides the last truth the source material keeps repeating. The market does not need to defeat you. It just needs you excited. If excitement continues to be the measure, the outcome is already priced in. If standards become heavier than urges, the outcome shifts. Your account is not a billboard for bravery. It is a ledger. The ledger does not care that you felt ready. It cares whether the trade deserved to exist. So the fork is blunt. Keep sprinting and feed the house. Or slow the game down until your entries are too costly for your cravings to fake. The market will still be here tomorrow. Your capital is the part on a timer. Pause. If the mission is money and not motion, then the only question worth repeating at the screen is simple and sharp. Has the market earned my risk today? Or am I just trying to feel alive? If this hit a nerve, good. That nerve is where the slippage lives. Share this with the buddy who keeps "it's fine" in his way into churn. Subscribe to Flow State Trading so you do not miss the next hard cut-through trader delusion. And if you want your decisions to stop financing your impulses, stick around. We are not here to pet feelings. We are here to turn presence back into profit, one heavy standard at a time.